This talk is to introduce people to the use of holographic breathing in birth. It was fairly early on in holographic breathing when I realized that this breath work was very good for pain relief. A friend, she'd broken her leg and was in hospital, and when we talked afterwards, she said she'd been in a lot of pain, and the only thing that seemed to help with the pain was doing holographic breathing. The doctors had given her painkillers, but they didn't seem to work, or not so well. But the holographic breathing seemed to ease the pain, bring her into her body, into what was happening. So it seemed very useful. And later on, when we started teaching it to mothers who wanted to use holographic breathing through their birth and through their pregnancy, we had the same feedback that as well as making the birth much more pleasurable, more meditative, more relaxing, the holographic breathing seemed to substantially take the pain away. And there are probably many reasons for this. In the holographic breathing, there's a gentle motion of the jaw. On the in-breath, the jaw gently opens. On the out-breath, the jaw gently closes. At the same time, the lips are closed, the tongue is on the roof of the mouth, and the breath is through the nose. It's a very small motion of the jaw. There's a free text version of this on my website, how to do this, bring people into this, and a video describing how to learn it. And there also is a download of the whole first seminar and a practice seminar. I think that's very inexpensive, a couple of pounds, I think. So you can learn this for free from my website, but there is this very gentle motion of the jaw which just feels natural. It just, once it's going, it just seems to take over the whole jaw, the whole face becomes very relaxed, the head, the neck, and through the whole body. And it has been well known by midwives that through birth it's very useful to have a relaxed jaw. So the jaw seems to relate to the pelvis and to the sit bones. If the jaw is relaxed, the pelvis is relaxed. So in holographic breathing, not only is the jaw relaxed, it's in continual motion with the breath. And it relates to the pelvis, it relates to the sit bones, so it also aids that for the pelvis to be in motion with the breath, opening and closing with the breath. So I think that is one of the reasons. Also the holographic breathing, the whole face, you start feeling the movement of the breath through the whole face and through the whole cranium, the neck, and down through the whole body. Now also you can learn that in that first seminar, the first download, teach how to breathe through the whole body with the holographic breathing. And so it does help with the cranium and the movement of the breath through the cranium and through the brain. And I think what also may be happening here in birth, because it helps the brain to the movement of the brain and the breath in the brain, it may be helping the release of hormones in birth. The oxytocin is one of the hormones that releases that is very good feel-good factor. It's the love hormone. It's there in orgasm, in love making, in birth, and it's got a very very nice feel to it. So it brings you into your body, it brings you into the experience, it makes the experience feel nice, it makes feel ecstatic. That is the way of this hormone. It's very helpful in birth to bring you into the experience as an ecstatic experience as well as everything else. And the other hormones that can be released are endorphins. These are natural opiates. And they are strong, they're not weak painkillers at all. They are very powerful painkillers and will help through birth, will take the pain away. So if these are more readily accessible, if the brain, our cranium is being helped to breathe and helped to function, and these are more readily available, then it will become less painful. More endorphins will take away the pain. They're very powerful painkillers, but they're not like a man-made painkiller that takes you out of the experience or numbs part of your body. Everything stays alive, everything stays aware, brings you into the experience, makes you more attentive, doesn't take you out of it, it brings you into it. So these natural painkillers are a very handy thing to have to brain, very important through birth. So I think the movement of the jaw, the movement of the face, the movement of the cranium and breath through that whole area and brain may help the release more readily of these hormones that help through birth and reduce the pain and make the birth more nice feeling, ecstatic feeling when these hormones are released. So that may also be happening. But also in holographic breathing, through the different seminars, we learn how the whole body breathes in different ways and the energies of the body. And we work with the pelvis and the sacrum. There's a movement of the pelvis with the breath, or at least in holographic breathing there, so we're able to access that in holographic breathing. So the mothers who use it through birth, they're used to being able to sink into their own pelvis and feeling their pelvis, the movement of the breath in their pelvis. So again, it is no longer a fixture, it's a movement, so it can open and close. And this changes the gestalt of birth. You can feel your pelvis opening and closing, the cervix opening and closing with the breath. This changes the gestalt. Because generally it's a bit like, oh, my cervix got to open and open, my pelvis got to open and open for this baby somehow to come out. It's got to open and open. It's going to take all of these hours. And then the baby's going to come. It's like a big breath, opening, 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 opening. The baby comes out and closing, 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 closing. But if you're massaging the baby, every breath becomes a birth, opening, closing, opening, closing. And it's not a fight, you're massaging the baby. In a way, to look at this, you have to view a bit more deeply into the mechanics of the breath. Our lungs can open in all directions and can expand because there's breath coming in, there's air coming in from the outside. So they can expand in all ways, and the breath comes in, but the rest of the body, there's a movement of the breath through the whole body. That body stays the same volume, so for it to expand in one direction, it's got to contract in another direction. And the muscles of the chest, of the diaphragm when the chest is breathing, these are contracting. They're working. The muscles are working on the in-breath. They all contract. The ribs lift and open. The diaphragm drops down. The breath comes in. They relax. The diaphragm rises back up. The ribs drop down and in. Breathing in, breathing out. But to do this, breathing in, the muscles are contracting to do that. Breathing out, they're relaxing. So even though it feels like an expansion, we don't feel the work the muscles are doing. The muscles are contracting to cause that expansion. And through the whole body, the breath, the movement of the breath moves through the whole body. So everywhere else, for the abdomen to breathe, we get this experience of the abdomen expanding. For that to happen, it has to shorten top to bottom. And it's actually the shortening top to bottom, the muscles of the diaphragm contracting and pulling down, the quadratus muscles contracting, pulling down, the pelvic diaphragm rising slightly. There's this psh, and that causes the expansion. So there we feel the expansion, but actually there's a contraction to do that. And through all the cells, for a cell to move, for a cell to breathe, or amoeba, one cell to move, contracts top to bottom so that it can expand. Relaxes, so it lengthens top to bottom, contracts. So there's this breath going through everything. It's a movement of the breath. So the muscles, as we breathe in, they're contracting. And then everything expands out sideways, including the lungs, except the lungs also expand downwards as the diaphragm drops. The air comes in. In the abdomen, the diaphragm rises, quadratus muscles, they're shrinking here, the pelvic diaphragm's coming up a bit, so you get this contraction and you get this expansion. To look at birth as a breath, you have to look at the makeup of the uterus. The muscles of the uterus are longitudinal. And with the breath, they contract, the uterus shrinks top to bottom. But the volume will stay the same, the baby will stay the same volume inside. So as it contracts top to bottom, it's the same as the abdomen, it expands sideways. So there is a contraction. It's called a contraction. It often felt as a contraction, but also as it's contracting this way, to a certain extent, the cervix will open a little bit more, the pelvis will open a little bit more, but not hugely on each one, sometimes maybe, but generally a little bit. So what there is, there's also this expansion sideways for it to contract top to bottom. This is a breath. This is how the body breathes. Generally, through the whole body, the movement of the breath, everything contracts top to bottom, which gives the expansion, and we are aware of the expansion and not so much the top to bottom. So this, the uterus contracting top to bottom and expanding, that is a breath, the same as the rest of the body. And often, when mothers relax into birth, they experience the contractions as a let go, as an expansion. Which in a lot of ways they are, they're expansion out to the sides. And also you've got to look at this as a breath in the baby. The breath is being ignited in the baby. The baby is longitudinal in the uterus, so as it contracts, baby is shortening top to bottom, but it's expanding out to the sides. It's the breath. Shortens top to bottom, breathing in, it's expanding. After the contraction, between the contraction, lengthening, but it's contracting, it's coming in. It's an out-breath. So in looking at the breath and the function of the breath, the contractions are an in-breath. I know they're talked of often as an out-breath, but actually physiologically an in-breath. But there's an expansion to the sides. And then between the contractions is more like an out-breath. But it's imparting the breath into the baby. The baby is being born, but also it's being ignited. It's having, in a very real way, the physiological movement of the breath imprinted in the baby on every contraction. But also you've got to remember the abdomen is working in exactly or very similar way. So we breathe in, we're getting this expansion that way, but to get that expansion, top to bottom contraction. This, if you're breathing in while you're in a contraction, this will aid the contraction because the diaphragm's coming down and the abdomen's expanding, so it will aid the contraction. Then as you're breathing out, it will slightly lessen the contraction. Small bit, admittedly it's a small bit, but it is an effect. So there's long breath, there's the whole birth, there's one breath if you wish. Then there's the contractions, which are a shorter breath, and then there's the breath, the mother, which is again a shorter breath on top of that. But all of this is imparting this movement into the baby. It's expanding out to the sides on the in-breath. And that is brought about by the contraction top to bottom. It's contracting medially on the out-breath, and that is brought about by the lengthening because the volume stays the same. And the same is happening in the pelvis with the mother. On the in-breath is breathing in, and she is doing it anyway, but with holographic breathing we are aware of it. The pelvis is opening. Cervix opening. Breathing out, it's all closing again. This is massaging the baby's head. But not only is it massaging the baby's head, it's imparting the breath, the movement of the breath within our cranium. Says, and we learn it in the different seminars, it's opening on the in-breath, closing on the out-breath. Opening on the in-breath, closing on the out-breath. But producing this, it's shrinking top to bottom on the in-breath to cause that. We're not aware of it so much, but the thing that's doing it is top to bottom contraction on the in-breath to make it expand, and then as it comes in, it's lengthening. So mother is breathing, the pelvis breathing in the baby's head. Breathing in, breathing out, pelvis coming in, baby's head is lengthening. It's imparting the movement of the breath to the baby. So this is a way of viewing the birth, brings you into the journey, and it's not this ever increasing expansion for however long it takes. It's expand, contract, expand, contract. And it's teaching the baby in a physiological way, expand, contract, expand, contract. And the contractions, even though they're this, or you're feeling them, that they're also this. Contraction, baby's expanding. Between contractions, baby is breathing out. Contraction, baby is breathing in. Between the contraction, the baby is breathing out. So we're aware of this. It's the other way around with the contraction of what we're aware of. We're aware of this, but actually it's also doing that. And I think when the mothers speak of the contractions as feeling like, wow, it's really weird. I know it's a contraction, but it feels like an expansion. It is, because it stays the same volume. It's like having a tennis ball. If you hit a tennis ball or squish a tennis ball, it expands out to the sides. And then as it bounces off, it elongates the other way. It stays the same volume. The baby stays the same volume. The uterus stays the same volume. The cranium stays the same volume. Everything, it stays the same volume. But on the in-breath it all expands, and to promote that it shortens top to bottom. The out-breath it all contracts. To promote that it elongates top to bottom. And through birth, your own breath, the breath in the pelvis, the breath in the diaphragm, this is imparting this to the baby. The contractions are stronger. They are a real initiation. Breathing in, they're really expanding, because it's the impetus is top to bottom, but in fact what it's doing is opening out to the sides. It's just breathing in, and as it releases, breathing out, it's elongating. It's initiating, or in my eyes, how I see it. I could of course be wrong. How I see it is an initiation of the breath. Then when the baby comes out, it's finally breathed its way out, been initiating the breath, comes out, breathes, and then it starts suckling. The movement in suckling is very similar to holographic breathing. Holographic breathing is a very subtle form of suckling in line with the breath, but it's also igniting the breath through the baby's body, and everything starts aligning. It's not just the mouth, the roof of the mouth, it's everything. Starts moving, starts breathing, comes in line with the breath, comes in line with this movement of the suckling. And everything in the holographic breathing is the same. This movement of the mouth ignites a breath through the whole body, where you can feel everything, every cell breathing. In birth, it's a big initiation of the breath. Contraction, it's all expanding sideways. Between the contractions, all contracting back in your own breath. It's all expanding out to the sides. It's being initiated by this. Out breath, it's all contracting as it rises. It's the same thing. In the pelvis, it's the same thing. Around the cranium of the baby, breathing in. As it opens the baby's head. Opening. Breathing out, the pelvis is coming, baby. So you go. We breathe with the lungs when air can come in and leave. That can all expand, but everywhere else, every cell, for a cell to expand in one direction, it's got to contract. And it's normally the contraction, because the muscles can do that. They can contract, that produces the expansion. So this is another reason, and one of the main reasons I feel that holographic breathing is helpful in birth. One, the jaw is always moving. This midwives have known this for a long time. This aids with the birth. It's always relaxed. Also, you get this movement of the breath through the body, and also you can view the whole birth as a breath. The contractions is also an expansion, and the in-breath. So anyway, that's how I view birth. Correctly or not, I don't know, but holographic breathing really seems to aid birth, and really seems to take away the pain of birth. We have the seminars there. They're not expensive. You can download them. A certain amount of them I'm making more and more available as downloads, or you can learn directly with me. Okay. Thank you.